are listening to Moments Podcast with me, Shuang Cai. In this show, I am going to talk to artists, academics, industry practitioners, and entrepreneurs from a variety of backgrounds, each of whom is committed to imagining a better tomorrow and working to make it a reality. Some of their experiences are experimental, some are highly practical and ambitious. Most importantly, each dialogue is imaginative, because we want to engage in dialogue with people from all over the world who are curious about life, to enjoy a moment together, to seize the moment, to seize eternity. Join me and these amazing people and their experience life as it meant to be lived. Hello everyone, welcome to Moments Podcast. Today's guest is Steven Lim. After completing his undergraduate studies in film studies at the University of Warwick, he went to Japan to pursue a master's degree in English language teaching. Now he has been teaching English in Japan for nearly 20 years and is currently pursuing a PhD. His passion, professionalism, and resilience inspired me to have this conversation with him. Steven.
Hi.
Yeah, what a wonderful chance to meet you in Manchester, right? Because I didn't expect that I will meet some alumni from Warwick.
Yeah, it was really nice when I saw your name on the conference program and I noticed that you're from the University of Warwick. I was like, wow, that's a blast from the past. So that's why
And
I
you
came.
didn't expect that as well, right?
No, not at all.
So, because you gave us such a solid presentation, actually two presentations. So, I kind of had the idea, oh, okay, I think I probably should interview you, let's do a podcast. Why not?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me on my first ever podcast. This is a new experience for me, so please treat me gently.
Yeah, I will. And congratulations again on being the best presenter on that conference.
That's extremely kind of you to say. I think there are a lot of really wonderful presentations at that conference, and
Mhm.
I'm very used to going to a lot of conferences that are based on linguistics and teaching. So
Mhm.
it was really interesting to see a lot of presentations about things I'm not very familiar with.
Yeah.
Uh, and
Mhm.
that's why I was so enthused by your presentation as well. It was very interesting to hear about theater students in China.
Before we met, did you notice that this year was actually the 60th anniversary of Warwick University?
The
To be honest.
60th anniversary, right?
Yeah.
No, I did not know that. So when you mentioned that to me and that you were going to be trying to interview some former Warwick alums, I was quite surprised that Warwick University is so relatively new. Obviously, it's a very good university, and I kind of didn't realize actually that it was only 60 years old.
Yeah, it's quite young. It's not a baby, but it's like a teenager, I would say, right?
That's a good way to put it, yes.
So let's get some, memories back in time that when you were studying at Warwick, right? When did you study film studies at Warwick? Can you still remember the actual year?
Yeah, that was a long time ago. I started in 2001 and
Oh,
graduated in 2004. So I guess when I was at Warwick, it was probably celebrating its 40th anniversary at that time.
I see. So do you still remember experience or have any good memories or stories from the time that you were here?
I have a lot of very good memories from my time at Warwick. But to be honest, most of those memories are about the people I met rather than the lessons
Mhm.
I took.
Ooh.
So in the first year of university, I was living in a dormitory on campus,
Mhm.
and I was sharing kitchen space with 15 people. And yeah, it was. I was very fortunate to be put with a group of really nice people who, you know, even 20 years later, I'm happy to say, are very close friends of mine. So
Oh.
I'm very fortunate because, after so many years, it feels strange to come back to England, but
Mhm.
I still have a lot of the same friends from the first year of university at Warwick. So I'm very fortunate to still know them.
Although it's like a 20 years ago stories, right? I was wondering, after your graduation of, doing film studies, why did you decide to teach English and then in Japan? I mean, there are two big changes, you decide to teach English and you decide to live this country to another country. So what kind of stuff made you to make these big decisions?
Sure. There's a long story and there's a shorter story, and I'll give you both. The slightly longer story is that my mother used to run a language school in the UK, and we had students from all over the world, like Mexico, Spain, Italy, China, Singapore, and some from Japan as well.
Mhm.
And after I graduated from university, I went to visit my mum's former students in Japan because I'd
Mm.
become friends with them. And I traveled around Japan for 3 weeks and I just fell in love with the country. I really thought they were very warm and generous people. I thought that it was a beautiful country
Mhm.
and the atmosphere was very calming. And I came back to the UK and I did a CELTA certificate, which is to teach English. And then 1 year after I graduated, I was back in Japan working. So it was somewhat spontaneous, I suppose, but it was something that I was very keen to do at the time.
So should I say it is because of your like family business made you to kind of have this sort of life of changes to move to another country?
Well, I mentioned that was the long story. The short story is I was also a big anime and Japanese video game geek growing up. So that's the very quick version. And when I came to Japan 20 years ago,
Mm.
anime was still very niche in the
Yeah,
UK, and it
yeah.
was very unusual to like it. So something that had to be hidden from normal people. But when I came to Japan and I was catching the train and you can see adults reading
Hmm.
manga on the train, I thought, wow, this is incredible. This is just a completely different scene compared to the UK. So that's the much shorter version.
Yeah. So I would say you probably because of you like Japanese cultural, their animes, all sorts of reasons that made you new career, your new field of your interest, right? So then I wondered what was the biggest challenge that you faced in transitioning from study film to the field of education? Although you told me that you after 1 year of graduation you got kind of a certificate of education, right? So what kind of challenges that you face at that moment?
Well, I did have some teaching experience because, as I mentioned, my mum ran a language school, and it is incredible how many children of teachers end up becoming teachers.
Hmm.
And very often, the parents who are teachers will say to their children, whatever you do
You're
not become
not.
a teacher. And then somehow it happens anyway. So, I don't know whether it's genetics or destiny, but whether you choose to or not, you're likely to end up as a teacher. No, I think certainly film and teaching English are completely different. But
Hmm.
one thing I will say about my professors at Warwick University is Warwick has a very high reputation for its film department.
Hmm.
And one thing that I was always impressed by in terms of my professors were just how knowledgeable and how passionate they were about
Hmm.
their specific areas of film. And even though I didn't end up in film, I never forgot, that passion and knowledgeable presence that they brought to their teaching, and that was something that was very inspiring to me.
So you kind of probably, I guess, I assume that you would probably use some techniques that you learned from film studies into your English teaching later on. Do you?
At the moment, critical thinking is a very important part of the uh, education program in universities in Japan. And no matter what you're teaching, you don't really teach English language purely anymore. There are elements of critical thinking, and that is essentially what film studies are. It's about understanding the context in which the movies were made, about the message that the directors were trying to convey to their audience. And that's all different aspects of critical thinking, not only what you see on the screen, but all the elements behind it and the viewer trying to interpret from that their own understanding. And that's certainly something that I think is valuable to bring into the English classroom. You don't just try to teach the language, you try to help people understand why.
I am from China, but although China and Japan are neighbors, actually, I have to say that I am not familiar with Japan, whether it's related to its culture, its pop music, or whatever. I have no idea about Japan at all. And I have no idea about their education system as well, you know. So, in my traditional understanding, when you choose to work and live in a new country, in another country, you should learn the local language. For me, if I need to study in the UK, I have to learn English. So I wonder, do you learn some Japanese beforehand when you move to Japan, to work or to live?
Uh, I did a very brief amount of Japanese study. I think I
Mhm.
did 2 or 3 weeks of conversation classes with someone who was living in the village who spoke some Japanese. Because, like many people moving to Japan,
Mhm.
when I moved there, I didn't intend to stay for a long time.
Mhm.
And I did want to learn Japanese, but initially I came up against a lot of the barriers. For example, Japanese has three different alphabets. Two of them are 52 letters, and one of them is thousands of letters. Kanji, which has its roots from Chinese as well. And for many people at that point, they just throw up their hands and say, "Well, I give up." But actually, we might come onto this later. But this is essentially the topic of my PhD: is about
Mhm.
motivation to learn Japanese from long-term migrants. So certainly, initially, I was very excited to learn Japanese. Then at a certain point, I became disillusioned and demotivated. And a few years on from that, I decided to knuckle down and study hard. And as well as I can, I try to keep it up. So every day I do at least 1 hour of Japanese, possibly more.
Can you show the listeners a little bit of how Japanese sound like?
いや、ちょっと恥ずかしい。私はそんなに日本語上手ないだから、まあ、みんなの前には日本語はそんなに喋りたくないです。
What does that
And
mean?
I said, actually, it's kind of embarrassing to speak Japanese in front of so many people. So I don't want to speak too much.
Oh, I see. Oh my God.
Yeah.
See, I have no idea about Japanese and their language at all, even we are so close, you know.
Well,
Anyway.
that's languages are very difficult,
Hmm.
which, as both a teacher and a student, I understand very much.
So you mentioned that language is really, really difficult for new language learners, right? But I really wonder what kind of the most common learning obstacles when when you were teaching for your students in the classroom, what you have observed in Japanese classroom. How do you help them to overcome, as a
Sure,
teacher?
sure. I think overcome is a good word for this
Mhm.
context because I've heard it's somewhat similar to the Chinese education system
Mhm.
in that certainly through elementary and secondary school, a lot of the focus is on accuracy. specifically grammatical accuracy and rote memorization of vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly speaking, well, to be fair, in recent years, there's been more emphasis placed on speaking, but
Mm-hmm.
essentially students learn English for the purpose of passing high stakes entrance examinations to get into high quality high schools or universities. And for that reason, there's really a strong focus on not making mistakes.
Mm.
And as such, students still carry that mentality into the classroom. Now, most of the lessons I teach involve communication, oral communication specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And that is one of the challenges that you have to help students overcome.
Mm.
Initially, they're very concerned about producing perfectly grammatical statements. And as anyone will tell you, native speakers do not produce perfectly grammatical sentences. You know, have half sentences, you start, you stop, you change topics halfway through. And I think one of the key challenges for any teacher in Japan is to
Mm-hmm.
get students to just use the language and not feel self-conscious about doing so. So a lot of my classroom teaching practice is more about creating an environment in which students feel comfortable making mistakes. And part of that is to show them my terrible Japanese, because if they see me, I often do my self-introduction in Japanese, and if they see the mistakes I make and the fact that I'm not especially worried about doing so, I think in
Mm-hmm.
some way, I hope it sends
Encourage them,
them.
right? Mm.
Exactly, exactly. You
Mhm.
don't need to be a perfect speaker. You just need to have the courage to speak.
It's a common part within like Korean people, Chinese people, Japanese people that when we were learning another language, we normally we don't dare to speak to the native speakers, or we don't dare to use it in our daily lives.
Well, going off topic a little bit, this is something that inspired me about your presentation, talking about students who are not theatre students
Yeah.
primarily, and they really have to learn to break down those barriers. If you're not from a theatre background, you have to make yourself very vulnerable
Mhm.
to act. And I feel that that has a lot of connections to learning a language. You really have to, drop some of your fears and your pretense, and you have to
Mhm.
just go for it. And I think that's
Mhm.
something that we probably share experiences of, is trying to break down those barriers.
Yeah, during the whole process, if you observe that some of students they don't dare to make any mistakes, will you pretend to be an kind of like an actor to encourage them, whether you are making fun of yourselves or whether you are using other educational tools or techniques? Will you use that kind of way to push them to speak or no?
No, I think it's a tricky balance, and I
Mm,
think it depends on the student, and it's
mm,
something that's can be difficult to make judgments about in the early lessons.
mm,
But there are a variety of techniques that I will try. One of the tried and true methods is you don't ask somebody to speak in front of the whole class. It's
mm,
very stressful to be
mhm,
asked by a teacher directly a question and have 30 other students listening to your response.
mm,
So what we do a lot is just facilitate communication between students, put them
mm,
into small groups, put them into pairs, gradually build it up to larger groups, to different kinds of discussions. And I think students certainly don't feel the same level of hesitation about speaking if it's in a smaller group context. But of course, you do get some students who are very self-conscious and still struggle with that. And in those kind of situations, you might just have to experiment with other techniques.
mm,
As you mentioned, it might be using some more theatrical techniques, or it might be just, giving them pre-existing frameworks to work with so they don't have to consider what kind of language they're using. They can just have a script,
mhm.
that gives them a level of confidence too. So it's all about giving them opportunities to practice and building up their confidence.
Yeah. So, to continue that question, will you use some cultural related education within the whole classroom to incorporate incorporate cultural elements into the classroom in front of the students?
I think you have to, because
Mhm.
if you learn language without any culture, if you learn
Mhm.
it completely disconnected, then students often query like how authentic the
Mhm.
English is that they're learning or how relevant it is. So
Mhm.
one thing I like to do is try to find something relevant to their lives, but in a different country's context. So they have something to compare it to. So, for example, last semester I taught a class on the Sustainable Development Goals.
Mhm.
And in each lesson, we looked at how different countries tackle the Sustainable Development Goals and compare it to how Japan tackles the Sustainable Development Goals. So that's something that they can relate to because they're familiar with how these policies are handled in their own country. And to
Mhm.
see how other countries deal with it very differently gives them something to latch onto. I
Mhm.
think it's also very interesting for them to see how university students in other countries live,
Mhm.
because it's just so
Different.
different. Exactly. I mean, just as a small example, to a large extent, the UK's alcohol culture has lessened as the years have gone on. But my students are still horrified by the fact that you can drink legally in the UK from the age of 18, because in Japan you can't until you're 20 years old.
Okay.
So, even these small differences,
Mhm.
catch their attention, and
Mhm.
make them question what university life would be like in different countries.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But based on like more than 10 years teaching experience, you decided to pursue a PhD degree, right? But in Japan rather than in the UK. I really wonder the idea that you want to do a PhD degree is based on or is inspired by your own teaching experience, or whether you want to enter the door of academia, or what kind of reasons that made you make the decision. And can you give us a little bit introduction about your PhD research focus?
Sure. So I touched on it briefly before, but my PhD project is about the motivation of L1 English speaking long-term migrants in Japan. So,
Mm,
very simply, this means that people who speak English as a first language, who have lived in Japan for longer than 10 years, I'm interested in what motivates them to learn the language.
mhm,
And the reason I became interested in this is because I think everyone has their own preconceptions about what motivates them to do something or
mhm,
demotivates them to do something. And it's very interesting to hear that other people don't necessarily have the same motivations as you.
mm,
So for me, I've been in Japan for about 20 years. I'm primarily motivated to learn Japanese out of embarrassment, because I really do believe that if you've lived in a country for a long time, you should be fluent. As you said, it's very important to integrate into that culture. So
yeah,
that is the pressure that bears down on me every day. But when you speak to other people about why they would want to learn the language or not learn the language, it's
mhm,
fascinating to see how much people's personalities and perspectives are revealed by such a simple question.
mhm,
Uh, One thing I'm working with is the idea of narratives and the fact that everybody essentially constructs a narrative of who they are
mm,
based on their current position. So
mm,
you kind of tie in together all your previous experiences. You make yourself the center of your story, and those experiences build up to who you are currently. And I
mhm,
think in terms of language learning motivation, it's fascinating to see what elements of their own past people weave into coming up with their current scenarios.
mhm,
I don't know to what extent that really answered your question. I think I ended up doing it in Japan for two simple reasons. One is very practical. In Japan, many people are still full-time teachers whilst they do their PhDs. Yeah, that's something that's very difficult to do in the UK. It's quite unusual, I think.
mhm, mhm.
And also, my supervisor who's very famous in my small field for motivation, and I
Uh-huh.
really wanted to study under him. So those are the two factors behind me wanting to study in Japan.
And he's British as well, so which means that you don't need to write your thesis in Japanese. Am
Which
I
is a
correct?
massive, massive relief to me, trust me, because I actually had to write some Japanese as part of my entrance examination.
Ah, ah.
Yeah, only a small bit, but my university, Waseda University, has some policies
Mhm.
about having to know another language. So that was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life, and I wrote a terrible and very simple essay, but thankfully it was enough to get me in the door.
So after probably you still have another year to graduate, right? Anyway, after your graduation of your PhD, you prefer to go to academia or you prefer to stay where you are nowadays, continue your English teaching?
Well, firstly, I love your optimism. It's not going to be one more year. I'm guessing it will be at least 3 or 4 more years. Well, this is the problem with doing a full-time job and a PhD. So
Yeah.
I've come to England on holiday, but every day I wake up at 8 o'clock and I work until about 6 p.m. So I'm just trying to do as much of my thesis as I can whilst I'm on holiday. So thank you for the vote of confidence, but I think it'll be a while yet. Yeah, in the very distant future, what would I like to do? I would like to continue both being a teacher and a researcher.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I've really developed a passion for research, and it's
Mm-hmm.
one that I didn't have before I started my postgraduate degrees,
Yeah.
and something that kind of surprised me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I wasn't expecting to be interested in research, but it's just such a fascinating thing to be able to study how people think,
Yeah.
which is what I'm very interested in.
Uh-huh.
Psychology of language learning, essentially. And so I've really developed an interest and I'd like to continue that. But at the same time, teaching is just so fun. Uh, as I'm sure you know, it's really invigorating to be able to talk to young, enthusiastic, passionate people, and that's something that I would rather keep as well to some extent in my future career.
Nice, nice. If you have some advices for future students, whether they are from UK, whether they are from the Japan, whether they are from China, from all over the world, for future students, what would you say to them for 3 or 4 years, undergraduate studies or postgraduate studies?
I think my strongest recommendation is to be interested in what you're
Mm-hmm.
learning,
Yeah.
and that sounds very simple. But I think that a lot of people start to go through the motions when they're at university at a certain point because there are so many other things you have to do as a
Mm-hmm.
university student. I know for many people, it's the first time they've lived away from their parents. They might be in another country. You have a lot of responsibilities. You have a lot of things to do.
Yeah.
But there is nothing more interesting than being passionate about what you're studying. And it
Mm-hmm.
really makes the whole process much more fulfilling.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think that was one of my happiest discoveries about doing a postgraduate degree, is that
Mm-hmm.
initially I was doing it for somewhat cynical reasons, in that I was just looking at career progression. But actually, devoting yourself to a subject,
Mm-hmm.
being interested in it, being passionate about it. There's nothing more interesting to me than listening to someone else talk about something that they are very knowledgeable and passionate about, which is one of the reasons that I really love going to these conferences, because
Mm-hmm.
everyone comes in with their own knowledge of their own field. And it's really exciting to see somebody excited about what they're doing.
Yeah.
So, to any students who are just about to start their undergraduate, their postgraduate, or even if they're just going to start Duolingo, I would
Mm-hmm.
say, invest yourself in it and it'll pay back two or threefold.
Mm. So even if you look backwards of your like different choices during your life journey, you will never regret what you have chosen, right? Or would you be more inclined to explore new adventures?
Well, I think a lot of people would say I have no regrets in my life. And
Mm-hmm.
for me, that is definitely not true. I have so many regrets. I can't even count all the number of regrets that I have. But for all the regrets I have, I would say to people as well that you can't hold on to regrets. You have
Mm-hmm.
to move forward and make new decisions. I think now, I'm interested in academia. I'm doing my PhD. I'm working in a university. But, just 6, 7 years ago, I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. And I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't really doing anything. And then I just one day decided to make a change.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that it's very easy to have regrets and to hold on to those regrets. But as long as you're aware that you have the power to change what you're doing at any time, then you can move on from it.
Mm.
Now, what would I have done differently? Who knows? I would have liked to visit more countries. I would have liked to try so many more jobs. But the good thing is that that is something I can still do. And
Yeah. And we don't live
first things
in the
first,
past, right?
exactly, exactly.
We live in the
First, I get this
future.
PhD, then I'll start a new PhD, I guess.
Oh my goodness, are you serious? You are serious.
Ask me again in 4 years if I'm serious. My answer may have changed.
Okay, I'll ask you in 4 years. I think you mentioned to me that you will be attending a conference in Shandong, China next year, right?
I was wrong. It's Shantou. So the English spelling is Shantou.
That's right. Okay, Shantou.
It's a big possibility. There are a lot of people doing some really great work in motivation in China at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, it's a completely new experience to me. And some of my fellow PhD students are from China.
Mm-hmm.
So to show me around, and I'll be looking forward to a new experience. I have not been to mainland China before. I did live in
Nice.
Hong Kong
Uh-huh.
when I was a young child, but I don't remember much of it. So looking forward to a new adventure.
I bet you will have a very pleasant journey because of, delicious food all around the street, all around the city, You will definitely love that city, Shantou. Yeah. Hope you have a very fulfilling journey at that moment. If I was in mainland China, I'd probably fly to say hello to you at that moment.
You're more than welcome.
And thank you again for your contribution today.
It was my pleasure, and thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed my first podcasting experience.
Once again, thank you so much to Steven Lim for sharing his career development experience, reminding us that the future holds endless possibilities and that we hold the power to shape it. Let us not be constrained by nationality, cultural background, or other factors, but instead dare to discover and pursue our inner passion and interest. Thank you for listening and see you next time. Bye.